Lomar, Part 1 of a short story by Jared I. McGee. Was it a place? A person? A god? No one seems to know, but this name just keeps coming up in my research and travels. The first time I saw the word Lomar was actually quite benign. I'd taken a group of students to do some work on an elementary school in the Philippines. After 3 weeks of painting and light construction, we unveiled the revitalized school to its students and teachers. This alone is a story worth relating in full, but that's for another time. While we were shaking hands, playing games, and eating as much mango ice cream as we could possibly fit down our gullets, we also had the honor of opening up a great many of the educational supplies that we'd provided the school. Left and right, my students were teaching the little Filipino students how to use their stick-'em letters on the whiteboards, where to get the stickers to complete the sticker book mazes, and, in my case, how to pop the brightly colored foam letters from their equally blinding primary shaded backings. As I made my way from table to table, assisting the youngest of the school's younglings, their kindergartners, I tried to see what they were spelling. Though some knew a select few words in English, they were far from being able to spell out much of anything in the foreign language. So seeing what they'd choose to represent with these foam phonemes and brilliant blocks for language truly interested me. And there it was. Lomar. The first little girl that I'd helped had spelled the word out with the puffy bits of alphabet, traced the word onto her graph paper, and then proceeded to stencil it on anything else she could get her hands on. I asked her what it meant. She giggled and continued her project, blushing and turning away from me. I moved on to another little one, at another table. Lomar. I thought it odd, but then realized that, more than likely, these kids probably only knew a scant few words in their own language, Ilonggo, much less Tagalog or English. So silly of me to be surprised at repetition of words with the little toys. With that, I shook my head at my own silliness and moved on to the next table. A tiny scant of a girl in pigtails and a neon pink and green Jollibee Kids Club bucket hat smiled up at me through a major gap, her 2 front teeth missing. She said, "Look, see?" lisping heavily through that gap. I squatted down next to her to take a peek at her paper and see what she was so proud of. There again, in puffy letters and scribbling, Lomar. I stood up rather suddenly, getting a bit dizzy from the sudden ascent. The little girl gasped, confused, and bowed her head, thinking she was in trouble. I grinned what must have been a very lopsided grin while I tottered a little from the dizziness, trying to make her understand that she was doing absolutely nothing wrong. With a couple of breaths, I was back on kilter, for the most part. From left to right, up to down, I scanned the room. Of the students present, 12 of the 30 had foam letters or some other form of alphabetical plaything and had all spelled out, or were currently spelling out, Lomar. All 12 stopped that spelling and playing simultaneously, and they looked right up at me for the briefest of moments, and then they went back to their drawing, fiddling, and merrymaking, all in unison. Now, I've always been a bit paranoid and sensitive to potential supernatural this, that's, or the others. This was no different. I got a chill and immediately wrapped my arms around myself. Rather quickly, I walked over to the only other adult in the room, a Filipino teacher named Miss Bayaro. I cleared my throat and asked, Miss Bayaro? I am so happy that the kids seem to be enjoying everything so very much. I do have a quick question, though. Yes, of course, she replied in her calm, even tone that I'd become accustomed to over the past month of brief daily encounters. I keep seeing the children spell out Lomar, L-O-M-A-R, Lomar. Could you tell me what that means in Ilonggo or Tagalog? I tried to use my offline Google Translate app that I downloaded, but it doesn't seem to be working.
Lomar, you say?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, Tito Shane, your accent is just the cutest. Your drawl, as you called it. Just like a cowboy movie.
Well, thank you, ma'am, but...
Yes, Lomar. Is not a word in Ilonggo or Tagalog that I'm aware of, and those are my subjects of expertise. It's what I teach after all. But, just in case, let's go check my dictionaries.
We strolled out of the classroom and headed the 20 or so meters away to her office. It was small and, like everywhere else at the school, sweltering with heat. The air was shimmery with those fun little waves that play tricks on the eyes on hot days. It was disconcerting to me, as my dizziness had waned but had not completely disappeared. Upon entering the brightly colored yellow and teal room, she pulled out 2 dictionaries from her shelf, what I was assuming one in Ilonggo and the other in Tagalog, put them on her desk, pulled the only other adult-sized chair in the room around closer to where she would be sitting, patted the seat, teeth glistening a stunning white against her dark, cinnamon face as she smiled up at me to sit down, and opened one of the books. She was doing me a favor, so I, of course, sat down where bidden and tried to be patient as she picked the book up and began flipping through it. Her mouth was moving while she did the flipping, so I assumed she did as I and a great many others did while they scanned a dictionary, encyclopedia, or some other alphabetized tome. She was reciting her ABCs to herself to get to the proper L section. Endearing. Cute, even. Her brow furrowed as the flipping slowed. She placed the dictionary back down on her desk. Slow flip. Slow flip. Painfully slow flip. Her brow furrowed even more. It made her look angry rather than contemplative or focused, but that was fine. I'd be angry too if I couldn't find some word all my students miraculously knew how to spell. The book went down on her desk.
Well, Tito Shane, I can definitively say that the word Lomar is most assuredly not in Ilonggo.
Shane, actually.
What?
You can just call me Shane. I mean, I get that whole Tito thing as an honorific and making people like family and everything, but don't worry about that. I'm always a bit more laid back about that sort of thing than the next guy. No misters, no professors. I don't like it. But yeah, no word?
No word. And thank you, Shane. That is special. I am called Iliandra to those intimate to me.
Miss Bayaro, no, wait, Iliandra, reached out her left hand and placed it on the closest of mine, my left, which would have been awkward no matter what. But my hands were resting high on my thighs, and this required her to lean far too close to me than one generally allows a relatively new acquaintance. She smiled her blinding smile again. I cleared my throat again. She kept smiling. I leaned back a bit, sliding my hand out from hers. A ripple of anger looked like it might be going across her face, but it quickly passed, and she was into the second book before I could recover from the quick deviation from our research. This search was quicker, but no less thorough. She flipped and flipped and flipped, and then she flipped back and back and back. The furrows returned once more and sought to commandeer her entire face. Again. The book went down on her desk. She took off her glasses, daintily placing them on her desk, and looked at me with eyes of concern.
Shane, that word does not show up in Tagalog either. Had I not seen those children with that word scratched and painted and etched and placed everywhere amid their play, I would have called you a liar.
Her unique accent, a purr of Spanish with a dash of Southeast Asian framing, made her words more weighty to me somehow. The furrowing of her brow had not stopped, but her eyes had grown a bit softer, seemingly out of nowhere. An odd look for her indeed. She leaned forward closer to me again. I tensed, wondering if this was going to get even more awkward for a man that just wasn't so terribly good at these sorts of interactions. I couldn't imagine how or why she'd want to bring this particular interaction any farther down the road she apparently wanted to go down, as we were in an office with no doors, no windows, in the middle of a school day, and the heat was palpable, something you could almost swallow. She put both of her hands on my left hand now, sliding it just a bit further up my thigh, making me just a bit more uncomfortable with the exchange. To my surprise, however, when she leaned in even closer, she aimed her lips for my left ear, and she whispered, keeping those pouty shocks of fire engine red lipstick well away from me.
I think this Lomar is something bad. 1 or 2 children began spelling it when you arrived weeks ago. Those 2 haven't been back to school in about 5 days. It's spread beyond them, and now we have those 12? It's come out of nowhere. I think something is wrong, Shane.
I turned my head just barely to the left, bringing me eye to eye and damn near lip to lip with Miss Ileandra Bayaro. I couldn't believe that I hadn't noticed the narcotic waves of perfume rolling off of her. Something expensive. Chanel? Something like that. All I had to do was make an ooh syllable, and our lips would touch. Her so brown they were black eyes were wide, both with the possibility of that ooh-driven connection and what looked to be fear. We both blinked dopily at one another for just a moment, the beads of sweat rolling down our faces, making the slightest drips as they fell. A whirring fan. Heavy, heat-labored, and proximity to physical affection affected breathing. Then, a crash of lightning. Screams. We didn't bolt up as you see in the movies. No, we were so drunk in that odd moment that we had to blink a few times at one another, fully disengage from that connection, and then react to the impossibly loud boom that had occurred so very near us. We ran outside and saw fire, people scattering. One of the buildings had been hit by lightning, and everyone was manning the bucket brigade-style line that was attempting to fight the fire. The effort quickly stopped as the afternoon torrential downpour followed the strike, showing up right on time for its daily dip into the Filipino world. As obnoxious as that downpour might be sometimes, it saved the building today. Miss Bayaro and I made our way over to the building. We were soaked through and through, but then again, so was everyone else. As I continued to recover from the opiate-esque influence of her eyes, I began to see what was around me. Everyone was crying, and angrily noting how this was one of the refurbished buildings. How unfair it was for such a thing to happen on the big unveiling day. But all I could see were 12 children standing just off to the side. Ileandra grabbed my right arm and shook it slightly, covertly gesturing their way with her head. I whispered, "I know," and we both proceeded to stare at them in confusion. They all turned to us at once. Both our sets of eyes were upon them, and they mouthed, "Lomar." Another crack of lightning struck a palm just 200 yards from the school, scattering the assemblage. Ileandra grabbed my hand again, crushing it. Lomar. Dear God, what could it be? Thank you for listening to part 1 of Lomar. a short story by me, Jared I. McGee. The backing track for this piece was taken from the Free Music Archive and is titled Forest Mixtape, an original piece by Violetta Paivankankara. I do apologize if that is a mispronunciation of the name. It is being used under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Thank you to Miss Violetta for putting her piece up on the Free Music Archive, and to Free Music Archive for providing access to such wonderful works. See the show notes for additional details and links. Please do stay tuned to Prose for the final story for episode 18.